What up, y'all? It's Dev from Mtg. We like it have magic. And I asked you yesterday if you wanted stand-up Dev or couch Dev, and you all made it very clear that you don't care about any of that. You just want to see this guy. This is the guy you care about. So here he is, and I hate to break your heart, but we got to start talking about magic cards. I know, it's not what you came here for, but we're going to talk about magic cards. It's a video within a video. We're going to do cats, but no, we got to do magic. We got to ruin it with magic cards. Also, I've actually already recorded this video one time, but I think I forgot to press record on the camera. I think turns out you've been doing this for 8 years. You still do stuff like that every time because you're a numbskull. At least I am. I don't know about you. You're probably a genius. But anyway, I've got all the audio recorded. So I'm just re-recording the intro and outro videos. So we're going to talk about some cards today. A lot of them are pretty good. A lot of them are decent, and then some of them are just like draft chaff and stuff. So let's get to those first. So let's kick it off with 4 common and uncommon white cards that we got to see kind of towards the end of the day, and these looked a little interesting too. Maybe we got to see Jawbone Duelist, along with Apostle of Invasion, Sinew Dancer, and Swooping Lookout. Jawbone Duelist is 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 1/1 double strike with Toxic 1. It's Phyrexian Soldier, so the soldier typing here might be a little bit important, but mostly I like the fact that it double strikes. That means it puts 2 poison counters on the opponent, and that's kind of nice. That said, strictly better fencing ace is a thing we've seen multiple iterations of at this point. I think there's probably better versions of it in standard currently, but at the same time, in the green-white toxic decks in standard, this might just make the cut. Now, I can't really say the same thing about Apostle of Invasion. I don't think you'd ever consider playing this in standard, but it might win you a game of limited from time to time. Apostle is 6 mana, 4 and 2 white for a 4/4 Phyrexian Angel with flying, and it has Corrupted. As long as an opponent has 3 or more poison counters, this thing has double strike. Now, I wish it was kind of like Jawbone Duelist and it had Toxic, and so it could double strike for more poison damage, but oh well, what a heartbreaker. It only flies over for 8 once the opponent's corrupted, and it could be worse. So again, this will win you a game from time to time. 4/4 flyers in limited are already good enough, but once you give them double strike, that's really not bad. But Sinew Dancer, which I just find gross, is 1 mana, a single white mana for a 1/1 Phyrexian Soldier. Now you can pay 3 and a white and tap it to tap target creature, or if the opponent's corrupted, it becomes the normal version of this creature, and you only pay 1 white mana for the tapping ability. We've seen a lot of just single mana, like tapping dudes in limited in white, like obviously throughout Magic's history, and I hate that this is one you kind of have to work for. It's like, just give me the normal creature. Why'd I have to work for this? But still, you'll play it from time to time. Tappers are fine in limited some of the time. And it too has the soldier typing, which could matter, but I kind of doubt it. So let's move on to Swooping Lookout. This is just a single white mana for a 1/2 artifact creature with flying and vigilance. It's a Phyrexian construct. This is a neat little dude. I tried to bookend it with the 2 white cards that I liked the most from this section. I'm not sure how much play this season standard, but in mono white and blue white sort of artifact creature aggro decks and stuff, where the top end is Urza, you're giving everything +2/+2 or whatever. I've been looking for a better 1-drop, or at least a 1-drop that's parallel to Hot Shot mechanic. And even though this doesn't have like the same power as Hot Shot, it flies, which is important. Now, the blue-white deck has access to a couple of blue 1-drops that fly and are artifact creatures. There's Network Disruptor and stuff. But I don't love that card. I don't know that I love this card either, but I'll still say that I would look at it. I'd look at it as a 1-drop in those decks, but I don't think it's going to revolutionize them day one and make them relevant in standard. It's just a card that I like. A 1 mana 1/2 flyer, I'll take it. And let's not forget that Vigilance too, ladies. It can never be Wandering Emperor. I guess that counts for something, but not much. Let's go ahead and move on here to the last few sort of lower rarity, lower impact cards that we have to talk about today. We got Nimrazor Paladin, Mesmerizing Dose, and Necrogen Rot Priest to talk about next. Now, Paladin is 5 mana, 4 and a black for a 4/4 Phyrexian Knight with Toxic 2. And when an ETB is return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to your hand. So a Grave Digger variant that has Toxic 2, which kind of matters, and a pretty decent body. I think you probably do play this in limited most of the time, but you only play like the 1 copy. It's a lot like Gravedigger. You're only going to play 1, maybe 2 copies, but 5 mana is an awful lot. Well, you get a decent body out of it, so you could convince me to play this card in limited, nowhere else. But let's move on to Mesmerizing Dose. This is the blue enchantment that taps a creature down of the set. This is 3 mana, 1 and 2 blue for an aura enchant creature. When it enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature, and then you proliferate. And of course, what kind of blue aura would it be if the creature untapped during its controller's untap step? It doesn't. So this is one of those, except it proliferates, which is actually kind of neat. Like in your all Planeswalkers deck, this could be a piece of removal that also proliferates, but I don't think you're going to go that far with it. It doesn't look that good. But, you know, in limited, hey, I keep saying that because this is sort of the limited section of the video, but in limited, this is like serviceable blue removal if you got nothing else going for you. So we'll move on to Necrogen Rot Priest. This is 4 mana, 2, a black and a green for a 1/5 Phyrexian zombie cleric, those creature types. And it has Toxic too. Whenever a creature you control with Toxic deals combat damage to a player, that player gets an additional poison counter, so it kind of has Toxic 3. You can also pay 1, a black and a green. Target creature you control with Toxic gains Death Touch until end of turn, so a self-contained little thing. You look at it and you're like, well, this only has 1 power, but if it gets through, it does 3 poison damage effectively to the opponent, and if it doesn't get through, it can just Death Touch whatever blocks it, and it probably survives because it has 5 toughness. It's not bad, but it's not worth 4 mana in Standard. I think it's just one of those little self-contained limited powerhouses. It's going to be like decent in the Toxic decks, obviously. It's a reason to go green-black in your Toxic deck. And in Standard, it might be a reason to go Abzan. No, seriously, I don't see this thing seeing play in Standard. For 4 mana, it's really not high impact enough, which kind of is lame. And also the ability costs kind of a lot of mana to use. You know, if you play this on turn 4 and then you want to use the ability the next turn, you kind of can't do anything else. So that's also kind of not super great. And so I don't love this card for anything outside of limited, but in limited, it looks like kind of a headache to deal with. But before we get to the super impactful stuff and all the rares and mythics from today or whatever, I know you want to see that removal. There's new removal every day. It's kind of scary. I don't know if I like it, but let's look at 3 new removal pieces that you might see in Standard, but I think you're actually far more likely to see in limited only, but it doesn't mean they're terrible. We got to see Anoint with Affliction, Hexgold Slash, and Carnivorous Canopy today. Now, Canopy is like a Broken Wings with sorcery speed, basically, but there's an upside to it. This is 3 mana, 2 and a green for a sorcery. Destroy an artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. If that permanent's mana value is 3 or less, proliferate. So it's not even always an upside on Broken Wings. You have to kill like a small thing, but it's going to be plenty of targets in the limited environment to the point where I think you could probably main deck this and it would be totally fine. But outside of that, I'm not sure how much play it sees. Same is true with Hexgold Slash. This is a red mana for an instant that deals 2 damage to a creature. Now, if the creature has Toxic, it deals 4 damage instead. So one of these like Voltage Surge variants, you know, they keep doing this where like the thing does 2 damage, but if special condition is met, 4 damage. Ooh, so if Toxic is a real thing in Standard, then maybe this is a sideboard card, but that's about as far as it goes. Anoint with Affliction is 2 mana, 1 and a black for an instant. Exile target creature if it has mana cost 3 or less. But it also has Corrupted. Now, if your opponent's corrupted, you just exile the creature. It doesn't matter what it is, mana value wise or whatever. So that's kind of great, but you have to compare it to cards like Go for the Throat and Infernal Grasp that are already mostly, especially in the case of Infernal Grasp, like 100% unconditional. So this has conditions. I will say the first few turns of the game, it's going to kill something you want to kill, and 3 mana value is higher than you might think a lot of the time. So this has a pretty wide range of targets, but your opponent has to have 3 poison counters if you want this 2 mana instant speed removal spell to kill a Shieldred, and so I think it's not playable in Standard. There's better options. But here's some removal that you might actually see in competitive formats to kind of bridge the gap between the lame cards and the relevant cards. Let's look at Vanish into Eternity and Minor Misstep here. Vanish into Eternity is 3 mana, 2 and a white for an instant. This spell costs 3 more to cast if it targets a creature. Exile target non-land permanent. Exile target non-land permanent, non-creature permanent for 3 mana. Actually not a bad deal at instant speed. I think this is at the very least commander playable. If nothing else, I think this goes in like all of the commander decks that are white. But aside from that, I think that this might see some sort of sideboard play in Standard, depending on what there is in the format. So kind of a cool little card. Exile is no joke. I like it. But we'll move on to Minor Misstep. This is a controversial card. The most controversial card of the day, I would wager. This is just a blue mana for an instant. Counter target spell with mana value 1 or less. All right, so I'm not like 100% sure which side of this debate I'm even on because I'm not really like a modern person, because apparently, obviously, I should say obviously rather than apparently. The debate here is whether this is a good replacement for Mental Misstep, which is banned. It was really good. It's a super good card. I will say this. You cannot have played a land. You cannot have gone yet in a game of Magic and cast Mental Misstep. You cannot do that with this card, which is suck. It's not as good. I mean, it kind of defeats the purpose. Because on the next turn, are you going to counter a one-drop thing when they have 2 mana? Probably not, right? But there is one thing that this card has over Mental Misstep, and that's the or less bit. Mental Misstep is just counter a spell with mana cost 1. This is 1 or less, which could like greatly matter against Pact of Negation and stuff like that. So I don't know. There's definitely like ins and outs to it, but I think the one giant advantage of a card like Mental Misstep is it allows you to interact with your opponent when you haven't been able to even play a land yet. And again, this not being able to do that, I think kind of in a lot of ways defeats the purpose. So I'm not like super high on it, but I do think it might have some applications. Now we got one more uncommon to look at before we get to the rares and mythics, but I think this one belongs in the relevant cards portion of the video. Almost certainly. Let's look at Resistance Reunited here. This is 2 mana, 1 and a white for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Equipped creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Now, yesterday, I talked a little bit about the red-white like equipment decks in Commander, of all things. I dropped a name every now and again. And I had people in the comment section saying, like, dude, I do not want to play Kimba in my deck. In Commander, I don't want to play this or that equipment in my deck in Commander, and that makes perfect sense. But do you want to play this in your equipments deck? Do you want to play Heroic Intervention in your Commander deck? Smartly, by the way, they made this version of Heroic Intervention an uncommon because it's worse. It's just a worse card. Don't get me wrong. I think the comparison is apt for the equipment decks, but it's not Heroic Intervention, like not even close. So don't mishear me here. But I think the closest comparison, especially in those Commander decks, is a card like Intervention. And yeah, even in Standard, where like a card like this makes the equipment deck a little bit more attractive. My one problem with a card like this, especially outside of Commander, I feel like in Commander, the games get a little bit later. You'll have extra mana laying around some turns. You have extra mana generation in your deck to help cast cards like this. But my point is that in competitive environments, even Standard, which I swear to you is a competitive environment, you have to spend mana in order to get like the real value out of this card. You're going to have to spend mana playing creatures. You have to spend mana playing equipments. You have to spend mana equipping those equipments, all of which you can only do at sorcery speed. All 3 of those actions you can only do on your turn. And you're also supposed to hold up 2 mana for this card, which is a little unrealistic in competitive environments where you're trying to use all your mana best every turn. If you're holding back 2 mana, I don't think your equipment deck's doing great unless your equipment deck is extremely low on the curve. So I actually think that playing this card, even if it's in your hand and your opponent plays Sweeper, I think playing this card is a little bit difficult because your mana is pretty tied up in these equipment decks. So I want to go ahead and say that as a disclaimer, I guess, but especially in these equipment Commander decks. This is a kind of ridiculously powerful looking card. Now let's look next at the only rare of the day. It's Mirren Safe House. This is 3 mana for an artifact. As long as Safe House is on the battlefield, it has all activated abilities of all land cards in your graveyard. Where does one start? There's just really, this card could get its own video, we just got a couple of cards this might go well with, right? Like the thing that puts oil counters on stuff. You somehow get that into the graveyard, which shouldn't be too hard. Then this can become a copy of that. You can do really silly stuff though, Dark Depths maybe, if that's in your graveyard or something. So that's real fun. I mean, there's all the creature lands and stuff from Mishra's Factory to Treetop Village. I could name creature lands all day if you just want that video. There's obviously creature lands that become copies of. Just Roadside Reliquary. Now I'm thinking about Standard again. Roadside Reliquary. Draw some more cards or something like that. There's a lot that you can do with Field of Ruin and all of its, Demolition Field and its variants and stuff like that. But both of those last couple of cards involve putting this in the graveyard, which I don't love. But, there's plenty of stuff that a card like this can do. In Modern, it's your Ink Moth Nexus number 2, I guess, your Blink Moth Nexus, whatever. So it's not bad. It probably has to be almost strictly in monocolored decks. I don't know how many 2 and 3 colored decks are going to make room in the mana base for a card like this, but you can get up to some really tricky stuff. But now let's get into the mythics, because we actually got a buttload of mythics today to close things out. Let's look at Staff of Completion, which we got late last night to start things off here. This is 3 mana for an artifact. You can tap it and pay a life to destroy target permanent you own. You can also tap it and pay 2 life to add a mana of any color. You can also tap it and pay 3 life to proliferate. You can tap it and pay 4 life to draw a card. And you can pay 5 to untap the staff. It's like Staff of Domination, only it's bad. I think this card's kind of bad. I've had a couple of people in like comment section and on Twitter and stuff tell me like, my favorite card from the day is Staff of Completion, man. That card looks sick. I'm not I love you. Your opinions or whatever. We can still be friends, but I'm not seeing it, man. I'm really not. I mean, it's worse than a 3-mana rock in terms of that of one ability. That's the thing. It's got all this like versatility, you know. Destroy a permanent you own, probably won't use very much. Pay 4 life to draw a card is steep. It's a lot of life to draw a card. I mean, I know life is a resource, but there comes a point, even in Commander, where you're like, do I want to spend 10% of my life total to draw a card? I'm not sure that I want to do that. I'm going to spend 8 life and 5 mana to draw 2 cards. Like, you know, maybe there's something awesome this does. I mean, it is free. It's free to use all of the abilities except for the untap one on it. So like maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's something you really want to blow up of yours in standard or whatever. But again, I love the versatility on it. I like versatility on cards. I feel like I've said that a lot these last couple of spoiler seasons because Wizards makes increasingly versatile cards. But this is one of those where I'm just not sure. Not sure it's worth it. I'm very aware your life total is a resource. I don't think you get to use this much of it, though. I mean, gasoline is a resource, too, but you wouldn't pull the pump out of your car and just, like, spray it all over the place. It's a resource. It's fine. It's, you know, eventually it runs out. So I wouldn't be playing with this card, probably. Let's look at Capricious Hellraiser next. This is 6 mana, 3 and 3 red for a 4/4 creature. It's a Phyrexian dragon. This spell costs 3 less to cast if you have 9 or more cards in your graveyard. Now it also has flying, and when it ETBs, exile 3 cards at random from your graveyard. Choose a non-creature, non-land card from among them. Copy it so you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Seems cool, but 9 cards is a lot of cards to have in your graveyard to get this discount. I mean, by the time you get the discount, you probably just pay for it anyway. I guess there's that. But I guess by the time you get the discount, you can pay for this and something else. You can double spell. Seems good. But there's also the fact that this is random. It's got the worst word that can be on a Magic card, which is random. It might not even hit like a thing you can cast. I mean, if you build your deck right, it almost certainly will, right? But it also... You could also not. It's possible to not hit a thing, which is just bad. But if you do set it up to where you're paying 3 mana for a 4/4 flyer that also like recast a removal spell, then I think you're doing okay. But it's a lot to set up. But up next, Sword Sighting, everybody. It's Sword of Forge and Frontier. This is 3 mana for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from red and green. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. You may play an additional land this turn. Equipped 2. Swords are officially confirmed back, which is pretty sweet. I kind of wonder how many we'll get and what different color combinations. It looks like maybe we're doing the allied colors, but who knows? Maybe we'll just pick random ones. I don't know. But it is pretty exciting to see swords come back. And at Mythic, I guess like 5 different Mythic slots can be taken up by swords, unless we only get like 2 swords this set. That's possible. But if this is one of the only swords we're going to get, it's fine. It's kind of fine. You don't see a lot of protection abilities in Standard anymore. I think it's something Wizards kind of tried to cut back from. But when you're making swords, it's kind of hard to get away from that, you know. But protection from red and from green aren't stellar protection abilities in this current environment, but they're fine, especially in best of 1, where, you know, the mono red deck has like a 15 to 17% meta share. So it's not bad there, but you still have to cast it, waste a turn doing that, get swung into, and then equip it, and probably waste a turn doing that too. So it might not even be great in that matchup. But if you can get through, then it just like piles card advantage on top of your opponent the red way, which I don't love, but you know, you don't get to like hold on to the cards or anything. But if you spent mana, you know, equipping the sword that turn and then you swing in, then it's entirely possible you just can't cast any of the cards you get off the top of your library. So it's just like +2/+2 is the only real bonus you got. And I don't know, man. I like the card. Sounds like I'm just beating up on it or whatever, but I like a sword and it's fine. It's a fine card. It's better in a way that it's not like really, really good. Let's look at Tyrannax Rex here. This is 7 mana, 4 and 3 green for an 8/8 Phyrexian dinosaur. Cool. And it can't be countered. It also has Trample, Ward 4, and Haste, and Toxic 4. Another spoiler video, another 7 mana card that Devin likes too much, probably. It's another good reanimation target at the very least, you know, pulling this out of your yard, immediately swinging in for 7, and your opponent probably can't do anything, but it still feels fair. It still does. Like, your opponent probably has to have like 6 mana at least. If they're going to Infernal Grasp this, they have to have all their mana open and enough of it. But if they can, and it feels fair, and that's okay with me. This thing doesn't have to have hexproof or indestructible or anything like that. I think the Ward 4 is more than fair. So I like this. I love the suite of abilities. Trample Haste on a giant body, classic combination on a big dude, can't be countered. So this is the old anti-control thing in case there's a huge control deck, or maybe if mid-range even, or mid-range Planeswalkers deck or whatever is really, really good in the format, then this becomes either a ramp target or reanimation target that can really do stuff at the top end. I'm not sure that it overtakes Titan of Industry. It might just end up in like sideboards and you swap it in for Titan in certain matchups, but I could see it being like a 1 of or something in ramp decks, or again like a 1 or 2 of in reanimator decks, where it's just an effective finisher, But for the most part, I imagine where you're going to most see this in, spiky players and tournament players decks is going to be in the sideboard for those control-y or late game matchups. But for the most part, I can see doing this on Arena all day, just ramp straight up to it and swing in for 7. It's my kind of magic. I just never get tired of big ugly green men. They make more every set, and I like Shrek, So we got one more card today, and it turns out that I didn't mean to, but I lied to you. We do have one more rare, and it's the best card of the day. I'm not actually sure it's the best card of the day, but it's the one I like the most. Here's Evolved Spinoderm, ladies and gentlemen. 4 mana, 2 and 2 green for a 5/5 Phyrexian beast that enters the battlefield with 4 oil counters on it. Spinoderm has trample as long as it has 2 or fewer oil counters on it. Otherwise, it's got hexproof. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove an oil counter from Spinoderm. Then if it doesn't have any oil counters on it, sacrifice it. So it's a Blastoderm. We used to have this card called Blastoderm that we all really liked, or at least most of us did. Some of us still have nightmares about it, but Blastoderm was a really cool card, and especially back in the day, you didn't have a whole lot of 4 mana 5/5s, much less with a version of hexproof or whatever. It's pretty decent, but back then when Nemesis came out, if you were a 4 mana 5/5, you were immediately compared to Juzum Jin, which was one of the most legendary creatures of all time at that point in terms of rate. So the rate isn't as impressive anymore, but a 4 mana 5/5 is still to this day good. It's a little more than baseline, which is where you want to be, right? This swings into and kills a Shelly. I guess that's worth pointing out for the same mana cost. For the first couple of turns, your opponent can't just like immediately kill it, which is great. Like you can't spend your entire turn 4 playing this just for your opponent to, Infernal Grasp it at the end of your turn and get mana value on you, untap all their guys, and now you're tapped down. That's just, that embarrassing situation is not going to happen when you play this card, which is really important. For the last couple of turns it's in play, they can kill it, but it suddenly has trample. So on those crucial turns of the game, turn 5, 6, really 7 or whatever, it's going to have trample, so your opponent's going to hopefully be at a relatively low life total. Trample is going to matter more. They're prioritized to use their removal on this as soon as they can, but they can't immediately. So really sweet card. I think in some ways it's better than Blastoderm. I mean, I know it dies after a few turns, but hopefully if you land this on turn 3 after some ramp or something, then your opponent will be dead by the time before this is. So I like this card. Obviously, Proliferate is a thing too, so I guess you can proliferate more counters onto it if you want to, but you shouldn't have to in your mono green deck. This is just a sick little 4-drop that might actually not quite beat out Ulvenwald Oddity. Oddity has haste. It's a good mana sink, all that, but if you want more 4-drops, and you probably do in that deck, then this is another really good one to be looking at. Hi, I'm back after an arduous journey. Look who's still here with me, this little bowling ball down here. But anyway, that's all the cards for today. Let me know how you felt about this one, all the takes and stuff, and any mistakes I may have made. Yesterday, you all rightly told me that my biggest mistake was not having Ziggy on camera, and I apologize for that. And as I put him down, I haven't learned nothing. But you also pointed out that Slaughter Singer does not make creatures do more toxic damage, and also I didn't put certain cards on the screen during editing. So hopefully we don't make any more of those mistakes today. Those are bad mistakes. Sorry about that, unless I'm actually doing these things on purpose because I'm a YouTube mastermind and it feeds the comments section, which in turn feeds the algorithm. It's like YouTube is a snake eating its own head, an Ouroboros of comments. Anyway, I'm not doing that. I'm not very smart. But important thing before you hit the lights here, tomorrow about 8:30 or 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to be hitting twitch.tv/SBMTGDev in case you wanted the whole thing, to talk about the spoilers for the day. Now, don't worry. You can either come back to Twitch after the thing is over. If you don't catch it when it's live, you can watch the VOD, or you can watch the cut down version that I'll put late that night or the next morning onto YouTube. So you don't have to catch it live. to see the spoilers. There will be other avenues. But if you want to be there live, you can. 8:30 to 9 p.m., something like that, Thursday night on twitch.tv/SBMTGDev. Link in the description. You can also check out the Patreon if you really want to reward all this spoiler season hard work, drive myself crazy doing stuff. But if you don't want to, that's fine. I'm just glad that you're here. And I got to get out of here. I think I've spent too much time on not Magic cards, but I'm dead from the place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.